Now, let's return to our focus on the future. The provision of services and care of the built environment has been going on since the first caveman banged two rocks together. However, the modern profession of facilities management dates back just 50 years, and more specifically to the creation of what became the IFMA in 1980. That's the International Facilities Management Association. We're very privileged to have as our next speaker the board chairman of the IFMA. With 25 years experience in most aspects of FM, marketing and strategy for some of the biggest businesses in our sector, he's been highly influential in the development of our profession in recent years and will, I am sure, continue to do so in his new role as Chief Strategy Officer for the Planon Group. With his views on the future of facilities management, I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Peter Ankerstjerne.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for the lovely introduction. So what I'll be spending the next 20 minutes or so on is really talking about which way forward for facility management, especially as we get into the wake of COVID-19 and also applying what we have learned during this unsettling year. So I'll be focusing on three topics: the new reality post-COVID-19, the likely scenarios for three FM pathways that I think will be defining for our industry and the profession as such, and then the whole repositioning of facility management, because I do think we're at this inflection point that we have already talked about during this conference. But let me start out by a quote from Milton Friedman, who said, "Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change." And I think that's actually what's happening at the moment. The crisis, the pandemic that we have been through is really driving a lot of change in general in the society, but especially in the workplace as we know it. And I think we as facility managers are up for a lot of change over the next couple of years in order to get to the workplace of the future, but also to reinvent the profession as we know it. So if we look at the new reality post-COVID-19, and I'll show you a model that you have already seen previously from Dr. Marie. This is this JLL model that she invented together with a few colleagues at JLL, where we have gone through the response re-entry and reactivation and going into the reimagining the next normal. And I'll basically use this as a foundation for my presentation here over the next 20 minutes, because I think it is really saying a lot about the situation we are in and how we can get out of it in a better place than when we entered into the pandemic. So if we just start by working at the workplace continuity and resilience plans that we had getting into the pandemic, I don't think a lot of us actually had a global pandemic into our business continuity planning. It was unfathomable that we were going into a lockdown at the scale that we were at, and also having to push all our staff or most of our staff into a working from home scenario. But the experiment worked, and we are now in this situation where this whole situation is redefining work as we know it. And one of the big questions when you talk about resiliency planning and business continuity planning is really, are we prepared for the next pandemic? And as Time magazine suggests, we are really not, because the key issue here is that we have to learn from our mistakes and successes while they're still fresh in mind. And since the effects of the problems vary, our responses will also need to be different in the future. Expectations are that there will be another pandemic in the future, maybe to the same scale as what we've been through, maybe less so, but could also be worse. So I think it's absolutely critical that we begin to have this as part of our new business continuity plan, and we also need to make sure that structural preparedness becomes a priority for us in the future. That is critical for the survival of the businesses. But having said that, let's just look at some of the scenarios, at least that I'm seeing from my chair at the moment. There are really three multiple pathways, I think, which will be defining for facility management for the future. There's the whole issue around workplace experience. Then I believe digitization and technology is another path that we will need to adapt to, where we have a lot of opportunities to bring our businesses into that next normal. And finally, environmental issues and sustainability is an area that we'll need to work much more with. And I'll just take you through a bit of a tour de force on each of the three areas as we move through the slides over the next couple of minutes. So the first one around workplace experience, I know some of the other speakers during this conference has touched on this point, and I believe we are on the verge of a work revolution. We have done some research at IFMA, where we had something we call the experts assessment, where 81% of the so-called experts and industry spokespersons that we talked to expected that at least 33% of all knowledge workers will work remotely most of the time. On top of that, 72% of knowledge workers are looking for a combination of office and remote work, also that Dr. Marie referred to as a hybrid, the hybrid workspace. And then 63% believe organization will make greater use of co-working site, satellite offices, and new type of spaces going forward. This is also what some refers to as the hub and club model. I really see that as facility managers, we have to grasp a new reality. We're going to have people who's going to work from the office most of the time, if not all the time. We're still going to have a lot of those people, luckily. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a big need for offices. But I think there's definitely a case for the office also in the future. But it's going to be a combination also with working from home scenarios, co-working or flex offices that we could use as part of our portfolio of workplaces that we're going to use as part of the business, and then also third places or public places. And that could be anything from a local Starbucks, coffee shop, it could be lounges in an airport or whatever. And it's going to be situationally determined on where the employee is going to be at that particular moment of time and where it makes more sense to work at that particular moment of time. If it's more concentrated work, it makes sense to stay at home. If it's more collaborative work, then we're going to bring people into the office. So that will vary through a month, through a week, even through during a day, as we bring people in and that our workforce adapt to these changing environments and what makes most sense for them. The key here is the flexibility and the individuality. Where are you most comfortable working? Where are you most effective working? That's where you should work at a given point in time during solving a specific problem. I think, again, this has a unique opportunity for facility managers because the pandemic has forced us to work together in different ways that we really haven't done before. And we are building these collaborative ecosystems in the workplace where the facility manager really can be the facilitator. So it's about the work that we do and understanding the work that we do and how the work changes and has changed. The workforce, how people are working, who are the people that are working for us and how do they connect? And then, of course, the workplace. And all of this is going through a strategic transformation at the moment. Both workforce and workplace, and they all are a combination of each other. What we can do as facility managers is really bridging the gaps between the supporting functions and using FM and as the centerpiece. So it's collaborating in new ways together with HR and the HR function, but also with corporate real estate and IT to bring this whole amalgamation of workforce and workplace together in an effective new way that we haven't done before. If we look at the next path, which is really around digitization and technology, it's around how do you leverage the workplace experience through digitization? And there are really three areas. There's the business, how we can support the business around productivity, agility, and so on. But it's also the people factor around health, well-being, comfort, and convenience. And then finally, the assets and the return on assets, and make sure we are going to control and retain cost, keep uptime at the highest possible level, but also work with the sustainability and efficiency of the workplace. So the reality around smart building is there's a lot of emerging property technologies out there. There's a lot of diversity within the tech space, and there's a variety of technology vendors. What's important is that we connect all the Internet of Things, the buildings and the data together to drive value for the corporation, but also that we keep a portfolio view of the entire portfolio of assets that we have, that we connect with various technologies, which each are provided by different vendors, but we keep as much as possible open platform technology, so it makes it easy to connect. And then that we easily embed this in the business processes in order to create value. What is key here is the way we automate the response on events as emergent from any smart component and any IoT device that we have. The building and the workplace that we are servicing are becoming intelligent. We need to be the enabler of that intelligence, and we need to connect all what can be connected into these data sources so we can drive the adaptability of the workplace, but also drive out the data that we can make some good and sound decisions on. The last pathway that I will just touch on this tour de force out of these at least three key drivers that are changing the workplace environment, and especially the role of FM, is environment and sustainability. The built environment consumes close to 40% of the world's CO2 emissions, according to the United Nations. There's a construction impact on that, and there's an operations impact on that. But what is important is that we, as facility managers, begin to understand what are we consuming, what are we using in terms of consumables, energy, water, waste, and logistics, and people in transit, but also in the operation sector, in the operation part of the equation, but also on the construction part, and see that from a life cycle management perspective in order to understand how we can manage the impact of all of this. I have a very strong opinion about we need to link all the environmental impacts into the human factor. Environmental impact in itself is, of course, critically important, but it really means something for us when we are personally affected by it. There's a trade-off. We won't go in and work in an office environment if it gets too cold, if we lower the temperature and preserve energy, but it gets too cold or too uncomfortable, if the ventilation system is not working effectively because we are trying to get out to optimize it according to the sustainability impact. So having the healthy building as a filter that you channel your environmental and sustainability initiative through, I think is a very, very good way of looking at this, where you preserve and safeguard the environment, reduce the environmental impact, but still do it with the human factor or the human being at the center of attention. We as facility managers can do a lot in this area. We can conduct a climate risk assessment. We can develop an action plan around climate risk in order to reduce the carbon footprint of the building in itself, but also the people working there. And then we can, of course, begin to implement and document the actions. I think all of us have probably done that in some way, shape, or form. But I think we can do more of that, and it will be a requirement from the business going forward. This is, I think, it's going to be a never-ending cycle of improvements and metrics, but they're all linked to the human performance and experience. And I think that's the key factor for being successful in this area. So that's the key for sustainability, environmental management. So the repositioning of facility management is really based on some key drivers and some responsibilities. The key drivers is a deeper alignment with HR and IT in particular, but probably also other aspects of the business. More focus on driving a healthy building environment, owning the workplace experience, and then deploying a workplace strategy. The responsibilities that we can take for the future is about ensuring healthy and safe workplaces, increase organizational agility and flexibility, and then also work performance and productivity and how we can impact and improve that. And then finally, we are coming for that environment around cost containment and cost reductions in real estate and facilities cost. Unfortunately, I don't think that will go away anytime soon, and it'll still be a big driver of what we're going to do in the future. But I think the bandwidth and the maneuverability around how we can impact the workplace and how we can impact the way people work and from where they work has increased quite dramatically during COVID-19. When you talk about workplace strategy, it's really how can we adopt them to this new reality that having a work environment where people are going to be working from home or remotely outside the office, and then they're coming into the office, and we don't really know why. Hopefully we know why, but we don't know when they're going to come. So having that ability to adapt the amenities, the workplace setup, office chairs, tables, layouts, and stuff like that, almost on the fly to adapt for the changing need of the workforce as they come into the office environment. That's going to be critical. But also to make the workplace attractive for people to actually come, because now they have a choice. They don't need to come to the workplace in order to be effective. But we as businesses want them to come into the workplace for various reasons, but among others, for collaborating, for being social, connecting and networking with their friends and peers, but also to be part of that organizational culture that is easier to influence people through when they're physically present in the workplace. So the workplace strategy is going to be a key component. And I don't think yet that we have a one unified way of doing that. At IFMA, we have developed a course around workplace strategies that we are supplying now. But I think working successfully with workplace strategy as the intentional strategic alignment of the business goals of the workplace or the business, the vision and the culture of the organization, and how it links into the workplace design, but also how we adapt the facilities around that is going to be absolutely critical going forward. So when you then talk about adding the new skills to the facility manager's role, I think there are some inspirations to be had in the business society just around us. I think we have to add on the capabilities that we already have as people that are really effective of managing to a budget, managing cost, being effective of managing cost, managing outsourcing relationship, and managing typically the technical aspects of a facility. But I think we have to be adaptability now in 4 areas as we move forward. I think we need to be more tech entrepreneurs, be able to innovate, be able to adapt new technologies and digitization initiatives. And Elon Musk is, of course, a fantastic example of that. I think also we have to be stewards of the environment. And there's so much we can do within our current remit as facility managers that we actually don't need to ask for permission for or need a big budget for or anything like that. And even though it may be a little bit extreme, but our Swedish friend, Greta Thunberg, is a great example of that as somebody who really cares passionately about the environment that we can learn from. Amanda Gorman, which is a new poet that just rise up to the occasion with the inaugural presidential speech a month ago, is a great example of a humanitarian who really takes the people focus and put the people in the center of attention of everything we do. And then finally, and I was not able to find a real person for that, but the greatest showman, our ability as facility managers to sort of put on a show to manage the experience from the way we enter or the way our guests enter into a building till the workplace, and how we are always on, have that ability also with our people, our frontliners, to be on, to manage towards that experience and be able to actually describe that and have a narrative around that experience so we can communicate it effectively, both to align expectation, but also to manage our team around that expectations. Those are critical aspects of the future fertility management. And that, I think, that's the path forward that we need to experiment more with and work more with as we develop the profession. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Peter. And Peter will be back for Q&A later. Now for the first of a series of presentations by three of our leading service providers, where we've asked them for their personal views, experiences and expectations on client needs and service provider responses in the current market. First, Sodexo. Now, Sodexo has been around almost as long as me, from a small startup in Paris to becoming the world's biggest food services company, and then transforming itself again into one of the world's largest multi-service providers. Meanwhile, their client AstraZeneca have their origins in Sweden, but are headquartered in the UK and are one of the biggest pharmaceutical businesses in the world. And of course, they're behind one of the vaccines that's going to get us out of this mess. With a joint presentation, here is the CEO of Corporate Services for Sodexo UK and Ireland, Julie Ennis, and AstraZeneca's Facilities Director, Dan Rogers.
Afternoon, everyone. I am Julie Ennis, CEO of Sodexo's Corporate Services business for the UK and Ireland. And I'm joined by Dan Rogers, who is Facilities Management Director for our client, AstraZeneca. In our joint presentation today, we're going to talk about how Sodexo works with AstraZeneca as a strategic workplace partner, focusing particularly on the work we deliver at AZ's campus in Macclesfield. So in the presentation, we're going to walk through the impact of the pandemic on AZ's workplace, how we've worked together to manage the challenges and disruption of the last year, and how we're working together towards future workplace and employee needs. So over to Dan, firstly, to tell you a little bit about AstraZeneca and the Macclesfield site. Dan.
So thanks for the introduction, Julie, and hi, everybody. Here at AstraZeneca, our purpose is to push the boundaries of science to deliver life-changing medicines. We're a global, science-led biopharmaceutical company that focuses on the discovery, development and commercialization of prescription medicines, primarily for the treatment of diseases. Our three main therapy areas include oncology, cardiovascular and respiratory. AstraZeneca operates in over 100 countries and our innovative medicines are used by millions of patients worldwide. We have around 9,000 employees in the UK across 6 locations, including our global headquarters and a new HQ that's currently under construction in Cambridge. Our UK sites largely focus on research and development and on manufacturing. I'm sure you'll be well aware that in April 2020, AZ formed a partnership with the University of Oxford to provide broad and equitable access to the COVID-19 vaccine for as many countries as possible at no profit during the pandemic. The vaccine has now been approved in well over 50 countries, as well as being backed by the World Health Organization for global use. And AZ has an agreement with the UK government for the supply of 100 million doses of the vaccine. So this is AstraZeneca's Macclesfield campus. It's the UK's largest pharmaceutical campus. The campus covers over 100 acres and has over 4,000 people working in the development and manufacture of prescription-only pharmaceuticals. We manufacture and pack products that improve the lives of over 73 million people in 130 countries worldwide. And the work that we do for our patients also contributes to around 1% of the UK's national GDP. This unique campus consists of award-winning offices for a number of our global and corporate functions, hundreds of laboratories, scale-up bulk drug plants, sterile manufacturing, tablet packing facilities, and our quality control and supply chain operations. Over a number of years, there's been a strong focus on transforming the site from a functional factory into a vibrant and exciting campus to attract and retain talent, and we're continuing to invest in the campus's future. I'm still a relative newcomer to AstraZeneca, approaching 2 years with this amazing organisation. I've been really impressed with what I've seen from a facilities management performance point of view and how the value of true partnership is held in high regard and illustrated daily. We use vested principles on the contract and we focus on delivery outcomes rather than outputs. And commercially, we're structured to allow the partnership approach where the suppliers ensure the brilliant basics are maintained and rewarded for outcomes and improvements to services. Things go wrong from time to time, inevitably, it's FM, right? But the way we deal with these matters, focusing on partnership and continuous improvements and the way we behave, the values we hold dear, have led the way, and it's great to see how we all interact on the partnership. The entire team are really well aligned to the business and connected to that patient, and we really perform to a high standard, despite the incredibly complex nature of what we do at the campus. Everyone's on top of the game. But there's more scope for growth. There's lots to do in terms of great place to work, and we're not resting on our laurels. We want to go further and really stretch the boundaries of what we can deliver at Macclesfield. Particularly focused at the moment are sustainability. We're hoping to be leaders in sustainability as an organisation, and we're well on the road to that. And we continually improve the place of work, a big focus on safety and well-being, as well as digital transformation. And the services that we introduce aim to give time back to science, to bring the patient in terms of the focus of what we do, and to take friction out of our colleagues' day, and to help the people who help patients.
Thanks, Dan. So as Dan has clearly stated, Sodexo is part of a highly engaged, innovative and successful workplace team. Since 2018, we have worked together towards a really ambitious partnership agreement and a transformation project, which we titled the Together Stronger Partnership. And through this project, we've aimed to define our joint strategy, set out our collective why, and establish new, more collaborative ways of working. And certainly, as we faced into the challenges of the last year, that focus on partnership and shared mission has been really critical. So I'll pass back to Dan to outline what that has looked like and felt like on the ground. Dan.
Thanks, Julie. So yes, throughout the pandemic, we've had two key priorities on campus, and they've guided our approach to everything we've done. So these two priorities are around keeping our people safe. I've very quickly created a COVID secure workplace. Well before this was a requirement by the government, and operated throughout the pandemic. And we actually helped feed in our approach to the UK government in terms of designing the COVID secure guidelines that are now rolled out nationwide. And secondly, we obviously are very important to our patients in terms of the supply of our medicines to them. So that was really critical in maintaining the supply of our medicines to the 73 million patients that rely on us around the world. So around 50% of our workforce has been in hands-on roles, so they've been on site and working throughout the pandemic. And the other 50% have been working at home in line with the work from home, if you can work from home, guidelines by the government. And the implementation of COVID-19 employee safety measures, within days we implemented mask wearing, temperature screening for our staff entering the facilities, extra cleanings, hand sanitizers, social distancing. COVID-19 testing has been delivered throughout a range of different service lines, including drive-through, home test kits. We've had antibody tests periodically for some of our people, and offered extra flu jabs to the population. And importantly, we've treated our FM service providers in the same way we've treated our AZ employees where at all possible. So things like flu jabs have been offered for all members of the wider FM team, regardless of employer. So we also, to protect our people, created bubbles. So we have a huge number of buildings on the campus. So we actually lock down the buildings and ask people to stay in the building they work in, and sometimes actually in even smaller teams and smaller bubbles, to prevent any potential for workplace transmission. And that's been really successful. But it did create some really interesting challenges in the way we do FM, particularly on the food aspect, where we had to deliver food to 2,000 people in a totally new way. So we also continued to move forward with our Great Place to Work initiatives. And as a result, we've had some really high engagement scores in our annual employee engagement score surveys. And we've delivered some really agile solutions, been really creative about the way we operate. We have a lot of audits, for example, and we weren't allowed to bring people onto site. People weren't allowed to travel in the same way as normal. So to enable those audits, we've done things like virtual audits, virtual conferences. had virtual business lunches and lots of other ways to sort of really creatively collaborate and keep that social interaction going that you sort of tend to get naturally in the workplace, that we've just not been able to do in the same way throughout the pandemic. And I think what's really pleasing is the huge amount that always goes into our challenging business as usual. Then there was a terrific amount of protecting teams and protecting patient supply, the amount of work that's gone into the pandemic response. But at that point, we weren't satisfied. We wanted to do more for the community, for our local NHS, for our charity partners. And there's a huge amount of work gone into that. I'm really proud of what the team have achieved in that space.
And echoing what Dan has said, we had to mobilise our teams really quickly to support AZ's two key priorities, which are keeping people safe and, of course, ensuring business continuity so that AZ could deliver its critical mission of producing medicines to patients, and not least the COVID-19 vaccine. We were able to leverage our business continuity plan to quickly build a model of resilience to critical science and manufacturing. Our teams had to really think on their feet, find new ways to deliver the huge range of IFM services that the team deliver at Macclesfield. And there was also demand for new services to support a COVID-safe workplace. And the Sodexo teams faced the challenge of creating on-site COVID assessment centres, mobilising testing labs, as Dan has said, and facilities. And we also had to deliver new up-weighted, targeted cleaning and sanitation. We redeployed 60 of our team from non-critical roles to provide key cleaning services that enabled COVID-safe working for AZ teams in critical production facilities. And we had to completely rethink our food services at Macclesfield in order to keep those employees safe and away from the shared spaces. So with our staff restaurants closed, we quickly implemented food delivery. In 7 days, our food teams turned on a brown bag lunch food delivery system for 1,600 employees across numerous locations on the campus. And from a technical perspective, we reshaped maintenance plans to deliver all maintenance directly by on-site teams, prioritising the key manufacturing and R&D facilities. At AZ and elsewhere across Sodexo's contracts, we mobilised a COVID response both globally and regionally. And that's really about drawing on the scale of Sodexo to manage business continuity. For example, ensuring we managed demand in our supply chain. And regionally, we also worked across the business to manage staffing. We deployed a HR app across our sites to track our people and manage absences or potential staff shortages. And through the Rise with Sodexo programme, we set clear global and regional principles for supporting sites to remain open. And we developed a set of COVID-19 specific services that contracts could deploy, for example, temperature checks, backed by regional expert teams in cleaning and health and safety. And finally, again, echoing Dan, I'm really proud that our teams at AZ went above and beyond, not just on site, but mobilising to deliver a programme of community support, delivering food to local food banks and NHS teams, and supporting local charities' COVID response programmes through fundraising. And at Sodexo, we also aim to support our own teams with topped-up furlough and a new employee assistance fund for those facing financial hardship as a result of COVID. We also implemented a whole raft of wellbeing supports, recognising that this was and is an incredibly difficult and stressful time and environment for people.
So moving forward to the sort of future focus, I guess we're now starting to cast our eye into the future and wondering how to develop the workplace of the future. It's been a lot of crystal ball gazing, I think, across the industry, and we're doing the same, so we're no different. So how can we react to the change that the pandemic has brought? So we've undertaken a colleague internal social media sort of crowdsourcing event. And that was really engaged across the globe for AstraZeneca, and in the UK, we tried to understand what our teams want to see in the future in the workplace. their attitudes to commuting, business travel. How's that going to change in the future? We've all got used to working in the digital way. So will that mean less travel? How much less travel? What impact will that have on the workplace? And how do things like this impact our ambition to be leading in sustainability? Obviously by doing less travel and commuting. What fantastic services and spaces will really help in attracting people back into the workplace in the new normal? We want that workplace to become the magnet to draw people in, to collaborate when people have that flexibility in the future, perhaps of working in a home environment or in a third space, as well as the traditional workplace. We think going forward, it's probably going to be less about rows and rows of desks. It's going to be more about coming together in the workplace and collaborating. And we want to make sure our workplace is set up to deliver that. And it's clear that people want flexibility. People have enjoyed, the flexibility in terms of working hours, working location, and that's going to be something we're going to have to try to adapt to over the coming years. We're well on the way to discuss that at various levels within the organisation. And people want that better work-life balance as a result of all these things. Of course, there's a real estate element to this, and we're hoping to make sure that we right-size our estate on campus and across the organisation to adapt to these hybrid ways of working. And that won't just look at the cost element, but also things like our engagement scores, the facilities that we provide. Are they the right facilities? Are they great places to work? How can we ensure that we maximise productivity of our people? And how can we reduce our energy usage in line with our sustainability ambitions? And we want to ensure that our workspaces and the workplace services that we deliver really attract and support a world-class workforce for our business.
So faced with these challenges and similar challenges that we are seeing from many clients, we've had to rethink workplace and employee experience. And as we've heard today, we can be under no illusions that the world of work has changed. Hybrid working models will be here to stay. And as an industry, FM and workplace service providers have a really vital role to play in supporting a new style of workplace. Our services are at the heart of employee experience and critical to ensure the workplace remains an attractive, fun and collaborative place to be. We also need to think beyond the four walls of the physical workplace and deliver services that really forge those connections between the physical and the virtual workplace and supporting employees wherever they work and whenever they are working. And in response, Sodexo has launched Vital Spaces, which is our new value proposition. It's an ecosystem of services, offers and partnership for adults at work. And as Dan has set out, we are finding that clients all over the world are coming to us with new demands. The first one being flexibility. So all clients, bar none, are looking for service providers who have that ability to work and innovate really, really fast and be decisive across all our services. And organizations are going to need to flex and be agile to respond to the changing demands that are constantly going to be put upon them. They also want more optimized spending on their spaces, more seamless consumer-like experiences while at work, and more virtual and digital work environments. And of course, really importantly, more support for well-being. And that means considering the full spectrum of physical and mental health. And finally, the pandemic for us has really framed the debate on the interdependency of people, places, and planet. So social value and sustainability are absolutely key. And what's clear for us at Sodexo is that if we are going to act as a strategic partner to our clients, then we absolutely need to evolve what we do. And while the traditional models of IFM and food at work are still vital components of what we do and what our clients need us to deliver, we need to bring together a compelling mix of services that takes us beyond the four walls. And we need to always factor in not just the physical workplace, but people and their experiences. And Vital Spaces brings together everything Sodexo can do to support employees. And we are building out from our foundational IFM and food services and drawing on the breadth of Sodexo's experience. So services such as consultancy, space design and planning, benefits and reward solutions, and employee-focused services like concierge will help us support clients like AZ with a really 360-degree people-centered approach. So what does that look like at AZ, and how do we really bring that to life? So in terms of workplace strategy and design, our Together Stronger partnership means that we continue to support the strategy for AZ's Great Place to Work. And within that programme, a key area of support for us is to bring our sustainability and energy management consultancy services into play to support AZ's mission to drive to carbon zero in 2025. And for workplace management, for the foreseeable future, we will continue to be really focused on delivering a COVID-safe environment across all of AZ sites and to support the return to work for those who have been working at home. And getting into work-life services, we are very focused on how we can support AZ's employees with great experiences, delivering the same user experience and convenience that all of us expect when we interact with other consumer brands and services. Our focus will be on ensuring we can support productivity and engagement, whether AZ's teams are on site or working elsewhere. And we're really excited to have launched 12Pay, which is our new digital food app at Macclesfield. And it allows our consumers interact with our food services via mobile app. They can order and pay via mobile, scan and go, book tables, give live feedback, and lots of other functionality. And feedback so far is really great. The teams appreciate the speed, convenience, and of course the personalization through bespoke offers and rewards. And as our outlets start to reopen, 12 will be absolutely crucial in delivering a consumer-centric service and experience. Adding to that, we have also introduced food lockers, giving employees the convenience of a freshly prepared meal delivered for them to pick up and eat when it suits them. At some of AZ's HQ sites, we've also launched Circles, which is our virtual employee concierge service. It's a fantastic service that gives employees support with life and the administration that we all face, whether that is researching for a gift or a holiday, finding a local tradesperson, or booking appointments on their behalf. And as we come out of the pandemic, employee well-being will be a critical focus for us at AZ. So running campaigns such as the recent Random Acts of Kindness Week or community fundraising events are crucial to help us create a workplace centered around well-being and that connection that's so important. And finally, we are investing in front-end and back-end technology to support user experience, deliver consumer insight, and provide business intelligence so that we are consistently reviewing and improving and, of course, supporting AZ to plan ahead. So finally, we wanted to restate that underpinning the work we've outlined here, AZ and Sodexo have a joint commitment to a strategic partnership. And it is rooted in working together to achieve AZ's Great Place to Work, which in turn supports its organisational and, of course, societal mission. And you can see from what we've presented today that our teams are absolutely committed not only to delivering quality of life for their own teams, but are also passionate about working together to deliver value to their local communities and wider society. Our commitment to social value, sustainability, and community at AZ is very much representative of Sodexo's wider commitment to working hand in hand with our clients to deliver positive outcomes. And at Sodexo, we have just launched our Social Impact Pledge, which brings together our strategic and ethical commitments across 4 areas of impact: planet, people, places, and partners. And it brings together everything from commitments to employ more people from groups who have found it hard to access the workplace, through to clear actions to reduce carbon and waste. And the work that AZ and Sodexo's team deliver jointly represents the power in partnerships. And coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are all more aware of the collective challenges we face in a really, really rapidly changing world. And with that in mind, we have a fantastic opportunity to reinvent our services, refocus our priorities, and work together to make a real difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie and Dan. The next of our service providers to give their perspective comes from Mitie. No stranger to any of us, Mitie is a company with a unique history. When they started back in the 1980s, they used an incentive model to drive entrepreneurial growth on the back of the outsourcing boom, which had been stimulated by the recession of the 1970s, and they haven't stopped growing since. By last year, they were already the biggest facilities service provider in the UK, and they reinforced that position with the acquisition of Interserve, the latest and biggest of many acquisitions over the years. Indeed, our speaker today joined Mitie as part of one of those acquisitions back in 2014, when they bought his business, Source 8. He's now their Chief Government and Strategy Officer with wide-ranging responsibilities, including acting as an industry advisor to the UK government. For his perspective, here's Simon Venn.
Thanks very much, Martin. The past 12 months, we've all witnessed an unimaginable amount of change and disruption, both in our personal lives, our work lives, how we socialise, and of course, as a sector, we've experienced all of this very much firsthand. You know, the fundamental mindset of our customers has moved from one of how to maintain and manage my facilities to one of how to keep my people safe and maintain their ability to work and maintain productivity, regardless of the environment. And this is a major mindset shift that elevates FM much higher within the organization's agenda. As a business, our first experience of supporting the national response to COVID came very, very early on. You know, almost exactly a year ago, you will remember that UK nationals were actually returning from Wuhan and they were landing in the UK and were being asked to quarantine. And at the time, we were asked by the government to step in and assist. And a location was chosen. It was Arrow Park Hospital in the Wirral, you may remember. And we asked for volunteers from our organisation, and a number of engineers volunteered to work over the weekend and over the next few weeks to carry out repairs to those properties and living spaces so that they could be used effectively to quarantine those individuals. It was a big job. And we had to turn this around incredibly quickly and safely, all whilst in the media spotlight, because you will remember many of those quarantined were sending out messages on social media. However, little did we know that this would be the first of many rapid mobilizations that would take place over the coming year. And at that stage, none of us really had any idea of how things would unravel. Looking back to March 2020, as the UK began to realise the potential impact of this pandemic, we saw a huge spike in demand for deep cleaning in particular. And it was our private sector clients in the main that needed this for their work environments, the office spaces. But as the first national lockdown came into force, their needs changed and the needs of the country changed fairly rapidly. And a good example of this was security services skyrocketed at this point. And that was, in part to meet the needs of, for example, national supermarket grocers, where we had more than 1,100 security officers required over a weekend's notice that needed to be mobilised and deployed to the supermarket stores to enable them to continue operating. Hospitals also required a massive increase in support as they in turn prepared and responded to the surge in patients requiring treatment. And that's not to mention all of the critical national infrastructure that often goes unnoticed, like telecoms, data centres, train stations, nuclear facilities, which all still needed maintaining and protecting. So stepping up to support the nation was absolutely core to this industry, this sector's mission, if you like. And COVID was an opportunity for our industry to demonstrate how we can step up to provide not just these vital services, but how we can step up at very short notice and keep the United Kingdom up and running and the members of public safe. Perhaps the strongest example of this was how the industry stepped in to support the government in rapidly setting up a number of field hospitals throughout the country, many of which, thankfully, were never needed. But I personally remember this because I was involved with setting up the Dragon's Heart Hospital in Cardiff. And that was really about the industry coming together. You know, it was the first time that I had really experienced competitors pulling together. And it didn't matter that we were from Mitie. We were going to work closely with Serco, with CBRE, ISS, you know, the NHS and other government stakeholders to effectively make the previously unimaginable happen, turning exhibition centres or sporting stadiums into hospitals in mere days. And we, you know, the Dragon's Heart Hospital, I remember we mobilised the entire contract in 132 hours. That was recruiting all of the colleagues we would need in just, took us about 4 days, from the initial advert through to induction, site orientation, and final, you know, first shift. We had over 200 Mitie colleagues supporting the field hospital, delivering portering, cleaning, patient catering, and security services. It was quite frankly a mammoth task, but the industry pulled together and we delivered. And we, like other private sector companies, including G4S, Serco, Sodexo, and Boots, again, our competitors in the main, also supported the creation of COVID-19 test centres, which are now present across the UK. And we support more than 100 test centres and employ around 7,000 people in every corner of the United Kingdom. I was incredibly impressed, not just by our business, but by the whole sector in the way it stepped up to help the nation, mobilising these test centres in a matter of days, as well as demonstrating the breadth of services that FM businesses cover. And whilst there are still many challenges, some of which I will come to shortly, the ability to rapidly adapt to meet the changing needs of our customers is an absolute hallmark of the facility management industry. And it's something that we've proven time and time again during this crisis. So what does the future of facilities management look like? Now, while on one hand, we've seen a rapid expansion of services in some areas, I don't think there is a single organisation in our sector that's been unaffected by the mass shift to home working. We ourselves saw many customers, particularly at the start of the pandemic, questioning the need for their office locations at all. And that's a concern when you first hear that if you are a facility management company. However, after the initial shock, in fact, many of our clients are becoming much, much more forward thinking with regards to the future of their workplaces. And the conversation now is more focused on how we can ensure spaces are used more efficiently, and the rollout of workplace technology, which was always really gaining momentum pre-COVID, but was absolutely accelerated, and the adoption of agile working and remote working became the norm overnight. So what was seen, you know, previously as a nice to have is now absolutely seen as an essential part of the way we work. And many businesses, including ours, have invested heavily in making their buildings safe and have adapted them to help mitigate the risk posed by the virus. You know, virtual front of house reception desks, fever screening, thermal imaging cameras installed at major shopping centres, specialist COVID cleaning for international airports to give passengers confidence. You know, and thinking about how we will work going forward, it will be about bringing the best of all of these worlds together. You know, FM at home, including virtual mailroom services, redesigning workplaces to suit hybrid working. This could mean more hot desks or spaces for team brainstorming and collaboration. And it's that it's really the forward-thinking businesses that are putting these new ways of working into place now. They are predicting and actively managing this change rather than reacting or even resisting it. The fact is that while the majority of us who have moved to home working have found at least some benefits, particularly in the warm summer months last year, I'm not sure about now, most of us also want our office lives back in some shape or form. Be that people in shared accommodation who don't have the space at home to work, or people who want more separation between work and home life, and those who value, the social aspect of being in an office environment. The truth is that maintaining relationships over Zoom or Teams is absolutely fine, but building social capital, new relationships, is so much easier done face to face. And of course, there are certain elements of work that simply can't be replicated over a Zoom call, such as creating brainstorming sessions or the sort of corridor chats that we all have that smooth the wheels of business and the day-to-day. Now, on the plus side, the change has also really highlighted that businesses can support areas outside of major cities. We know this firsthand. We have colleagues based everywhere, from rural Cumbria to the Isle of Skye, right the way down to Cornwall. And remote working enables businesses like ours to employ more people from different parts of the United Kingdom. Now, this not only helps access more talent, but it can help level up the country as a whole by boosting the economies of more remote locations. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know that more uncertainty is almost certainly ahead. And how we work is likely to change even more over the future. I also think that all of the players in the FM industry will need to fundamentally change their approach, both at a business model level and a delivery model level. So, it's inevitable that some organizations will make that transition far more effectively than others. The green recovery also cannot be forgotten. Businesses know that climate crisis hasn't been put on hold, and neither can their own net zero plans. Coming back green needs to be central to every return to workplace plan. We've certainly witnessed firsthand that there's an appetite among businesses to really focus on zero carbon initiatives. And at Mitie, we've been picking up the pace on our Plan Zero commitments to reach net zero carbon by 2025. Technology also plays a central role here too. Investing in sensors which allow us to track energy usage of equipment in real time and predict where components will need replacing or repairing prior to failure. This all helps save energy in the process. And when connected with the building management system, this can also help take sites in and out of hibernation much quicker. We're talking hours rather than days. And this in turn saves money on energy bills and reduces the carbon footprint. But you can also make lots of savings by optimizing what you already have. With this approach, we've helped Vodafone, as an example, save 25,000 tons of CO2. That's the equivalent to £10 million of energy over 3 years. And this was mainly through changing BMS settings, ensuring equipment was working efficiently, and optimizing flow in data centers. ESG is no longer a nice to have, a value add. It's an absolute hygiene factor for businesses. And just as we as consumers expect businesses to care about the planet, our customers expect us to be able to help them reduce their environmental impact. Because all of these factors, we believe there is an opportunity for growth in our industry, even during these challenging times. And that's part of what has driven our decision to acquire Interserve. It was about balancing our private and our public portfolios, bringing scale to the investments our business has made in technology and the Mitie stack, and offering a chance to drive change in our sector, which I'll talk a bit more about later. But the FM industry has already proven itself to be a critical partner over the past year, and quite rightly now has a seat at the table for many key decisions, including where employees are working. Now is the opportunity for us to really grasp the nettle and build on this momentum to help shape the future of what workplaces are going to look like. And that brings me firmly on to the real heroes, the people, our people. And whilst we're on a mission here to get recognition for the importance of our sector as a whole, one of the absolute key pillars for me and for our industry is true recognition for our people. And we're finally seeing more recognition from the public for the hard work and diligence of the nation's cleaners, the security officers, hospital porters, waste managers, engineers, and more, recognised for their work. We always knew they were key workers. We always knew they were frontline heroes, but now the nation knows this too. And we've taken the significant steps to ensure the safety and well-being of our people. We've made our virtual GP service accessible to all Mitie colleagues, free of charge for the first time. This also extends to the families of our colleagues too. We're also now providing life assurance for all of our permanent and fixed-term employees to help provide loved ones with the peace of mind and financial security that they deserve. We've rolled out flu jabs. We've also given all of our frontline employees who have worked throughout the pandemic an extra day's holiday to enable them to take some additional time out to rest and recuperate. And we're pushing government to do the same. And what that means is priority vaccines for our colleagues in test centres, cleaners and security officers. You know, we've seen recent research from the ONS that shows people in these roles are more likely to be impacted by COVID, and they absolutely deserve to be prioritised where vaccines are concerned. A fair day's pay for a fair day's work. It's not too much to ask. That's the real living wage, and we're proud Living Wage Foundation recognised service providers. We always present this as our preferred option in bids, and we will only work with customers that are willing to work together to move towards the real living wage. You know, during the pandemic, we walked away from one of our private sector customers because they wouldn't work with us on this. And we will do that again and again. We're passionate about driving this change in the industry. You know, it's time for the race to the bottom to truly end, and for everyone in our sector to come together on this. Our employees deserve decent pay that they can live on to give more opportunities for them and their families. Moving to the real living wage can really change people's lives, not only in terms of extra salary, but it can also help parents reduce their hours and be home with their families more, potentially changing the course of a child's life. I strongly hope that the nation's appreciation for the frontline heroes of the facility management industry isn't short-lived, and that it results in uplifts in recognition and pay for our people, particularly for the public sector, who have an absolute chance to lead on this, but unfortunately are still some way behind. Our workforce represents all sectors of society, with a very broad regional spread, but we have a particularly high proportion of employees based in areas of lower economic activity. And by working on these issues, securing better pay and conditions for our people, combined with our investment in their training and skills, we can help have a positive impact, not only on the individuals, but on their communities too, helping with the levelling up of these parts of the UK. So what is the post-COVID world going to look like? The world we live in now is totally different to that of a year ago. However, when it comes to facilities management and the world of work, I would say that COVID has just accelerated changes that were already on their way. This pandemic has brought a lot of change, but the legacy of this change is here to stay. We believe that in the next 12 months, the world will start to rebalance as we finally settle into the establishment of the new normal of hybrid working for many. The world goes on. New challenges will continue to arise. For example, I've barely touched on the climate crisis and Plan Zero, Mitie's own commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2025. But we all need to come together to tackle this, and soon, to avoid another global crisis. And it's our role as facilities managers to guide and advise our customers, colleagues, and government as they all navigate these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. We'll see you in Q&A shortly. Our next service provider is the founder of Pareto FM. Named in the Sunday Times Fast Track 100 for 2019, Pareto consider themselves a disruptor in the FM sector with their different approach. From a standing start in 2014, they've grown to a 16 million turnover business and established themselves as one of the most successful SMEs in our sector. Our speaker is an award winner too. A former Young Manager of the Year, he's been a tremendous advocate of facilities management as a career and the positive impact that we can bring to society as individuals and as an industry. For an SME take on client needs and service provider responses in this market, here is Pareto's Managing Director, Andrew Hulbert.
So, hi, my name's Andrew Hulbert. I am the original founder and current Managing Director of Pareto FM. Thank you for joining me on this session. And really, I just wanted to cover some of the learnings from the impact of COVID-19, the coronavirus, and what effect I think it's had on the sector and opportunities to really, for SMEs and other organisations to support clients and get the service provision right through this process. So fundamentally, I think none of us clearly expected anything of this significance to happen. And I think it's put a lot of service providers, especially, in a really challenging situation from March 2020 onwards. I think the constant messages of change, the complete non-understanding of how things are going to come back or whether they will or what the changes are, and just the complete no knowledge that no one can foresee what's going to happen, really threw a lot of service providers into a place where they had to adapt and they had to change, and they had to make sure that they could keep their clients comfortable through this process as well. Doing all of those things at the same time, as well as managing a workforce and as well as managing everything else that comes with running a business, obviously adds its own challenges into this situation. So I was really just going to touch on a couple of the, I think, positive and negative situations that have occurred through this for this process, and really have a bit of a focus on how service providers can potentially navigate their way through this time, and with a little bit of focus on Pareto and just how we've adapted during this time. So let's start with the positives. I think the positive side for us here is certainly for most service providers and definitely SMEs, this has really been an opportunity to demonstrate to customers the ability to have a partnership, the ability to work together, and the ability to be agile. And I think the SMEs are best placed to serve customers in this sort of environment, as the SMEs are able to adapt and be much more agile than the larger providers in a very quick way. The SMEs aren't run with lots of bureaucracy, and there's not lots of challenges and paperwork and hierarchy getting in the way of making decisions. And certainly I've seen, and I've experienced it within Pareto as well, an ability to really affect change very quickly and give customers lots of options for how they can do things, and how we could give savings back, and how we could apply furlough, and how we could work together to get the customer through this challenging time as well. So I think one of the positives has been the good providers have been able to cement their relationships with their customer base. And I think that's been really important at this time, because the alternative to that is that you don't cement the customer relationship, and actually you cause a whole heap of issues. And any relationships that were sort of fragile at that time are now really strained during this period. So it's been great to see, especially the SME market, adapt to that, and some of the mid-market within facilities management as well. I think the other opportunity that we've seen through this process in a positive light is facilities management staff and service provision staff have had to be based on sites during this time. The majority of our clients are at home, and somebody needs to look after the buildings, and somebody needs to think differently about how we're going to approach the management of these buildings. And what we've absolutely seen through this time is a whole host of new heroes come through this. And by heroes, I mean people who work for us and other service providers that for the entirety of the pandemic have just continued to go into the office, continued to take on extra duties such as flushing taps through to banking checks, through to doing meeting room checks, and even looking at things like fan core unit leaks and all sorts of stuff in between, because they're the staff that have been based on site every day, and often they're service providers. And I think what this has done is it's made us think more entrepreneurially through this time to make sure that we can actually adapt to what we need to do. But also it's shown our clients that we're able to adapt, all of us as service providers, and make sure that we can be agile in the way that we service them. And whilst they are having to go home because that's what's been dictated to them by their organizations, we're able to make sure that we look after that space for them. And hopefully, as we start to come back and the government starts to outline what the pandemic will look like in terms of returning to office space, we'll be able to actually continue to show the strength and the importance of facilities management, both in-house and outsourced, and just continue to demonstrate the importance to it. I'm not a believer that FM is a hidden sector and all that sort of thing. I think great FM is about being very much front and center and driving productivity through organizational performance. And actually, for me, this has just given facilities management sector the opportunity to keep raising itself through this process. But all of that said, there have been significant negatives through this process. And I think we're all aware of what those are. But it's interesting just to touch on those. And I think one of the first ones has got to be certain service providers, certainly, have obviously been impacted by certain sectors which have been terribly impacted through COVID. So a lot of service providers that work predominantly in retail, for example, have really struggled through this process. And it's a really difficult time for them, because if a high street chain goes down or is completely closed, how is the service provider meant to continue its business strongly through that period? So I think we've seen certain sectors which have really affected certain service providers. And as we start to get the quarterly results coming out from service providers within the sector, we're starting to see how the real impact of that has been affected. I think the other negative that I've certainly seen is some of the larger providers within the sector have really struggled to adapt to give the clients exactly what they need. In this sort of environment, what the clients need, from my perspective, is to lean on their service providers and say, right, we're in trouble. We need to come up with a new way of dealing with this process. How can you help us in terms of what we're doing here? And I think some of the service providers, the larger ones certainly, have been holding their clients to ransom with the contract, saying things like, we have a 3 to 6 month notice period in this contract. You can't force us to change anything early. And also, I think the struggling nature of being able to take full advantage of furlough, the inability to raise credits, the inability to change finances, the hassle of having to go through several layers of hierarchy to make things happen internally within service provision too. So I think all of those things have really challenged some of the larger providers within this sector, across all sectors within facilities management that we look after. But obviously there are opportunities off the back of that. We're certainly seeing more tenders at the moment than perhaps we usually would do in December, January time. And we're certainly seeing an opportunity whereby a lot of customers are coming to the market saying, we've fallen out with a larger provider through this process because of the inability to be agile through furlough and COVID. And actually we're looking for more of an SME-based organisation that can support us here. So ultimately there's a great opportunity for FM organisations through that process too. I think the other thing that we're certainly starting to see is clients are starting to think about what does it look like when we're going to come back to the office or come back to the workplace in whichever workplace that we operate in. And I think what that is going to do is certainly start to drive more conversations around reductions, changes, redundancies, structural changes within the facilities management outsourced provision and internally as well. And that's going to go across cleaning, security, catering, engineering, front of house, and all the other service provisions in between. So the other negative is the service providers in this sector need to realise that we're going to have a lot more difficult conversations to come before we start to get to a point where we're really delivering excellence and really starting to get customers back to a point where they're very comfortable in where they are and numbers aren't being looked at in as much detail, and other challenges around flexibility and agile working and things that are not considered as such a high priority as they are right now. The opportunity, of course, through that process is that the FM service providers start to work with their customers now, start to plan in February for returning to work in July, August, September, or whichever level customers are looking to come back on, dependent on the vaccine. and actually start to take that as an opportunity. Because the risk is, if the facility services providers are not willing to start to make those changes now, they're really going to struggle to continue and maintain those relationships with their customers through this process. I go back to what I said earlier on. I think this is a real opportunity for SMEs in this sector, because SMEs are able to be agile, perhaps take a bit more risk, perhaps make changes and contractual changes in a much quicker way than some other of the larger service providers within the sector. But I also think it's about being sensible between customer and service provider. From my perspective, customers and service providers need to work together at this time. They need to understand that, yes, there's a contract in place, but contracts generally aren't written for dealing with pandemics. They're certainly not written for workspaces to be empty for 12 months that then start to come back into the realm again. So I think it's just important to note, and although it's a negative that we're going to have difficult conversations through this time around structure and changes, ultimately keeping those relationships and building those relationships and making sure we maintain them through this process in the next 12, 24, 36 months will reap its rewards and its benefits through that time, and actually continue to show what the importance of SMEs are and other service providers within this sector too. So from my side of things, I've seen it from both sides of the fence. I've seen that there is lots of opportunity to be created here. There's lots of great ways to really develop the client relationship and start to improve things and show that you're an enabler for that business. But just as much, we've seen some providers fall out with their clients through this time due to issues with being contractual, and seeing a lot more clients coming to market looking for a more flexible solution. I guess what the future looks like now is our clients will start to use their office space in a different way to how they did before. Certainly clients within Pareto's base, we're starting to see that some desking is being removed, more collaborative space is being installed, so more breakout areas, more sofas, more pods, that type of thing. And certainly seeing a lot more offices being designed with singular pods now, so where you can go into a phone booth, for example, so you can work on your own. I think what I'm seeing from across the sector and the clients that I'm speaking to is they're not anticipating their staff to come back 5 days a week, probably anticipating their staff to come to the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week moving forward. Some much more, but I think on average around that sort of time. What they're saying is we now need to create an office space that's incredibly productive and a real meaningful reason to go to the office and actually have proper interactions whilst you're there. And I think what that will do is it will drive certain behaviors in our clients to create the right types of spaces. The thing I always flick back to is the fact that there are 5 generations in the workforce. And there's a great paper by Barclays that outlines all of that, which was written a few years ago now. But the fact is, if you generalize, you've got the Generation Z, so the people in their early 20s, probably a lot of those are either sat at home with mum and dad at the moment, or they're living in a very small flat because that's all they can afford as they're early in their careers. They're not loving this idea of lockdown in general terms, and actually they'd love to be back into the office to make sure they get the social aspect of what they're looking for. Go through to some of the older members of the team that operate across our organizations. They've been working in the office for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Actually, part of this has been a welcome break that they don't have to go to the office every day. And I'm not sure those people are going to be as keen to be going back to the office 5 days a week. I think it's going to be a really important balance that we work between managing all those generations, between Generation Z and the baby boomers, and make sure that we create environments for them. And service providers have the opportunity with their customers here to adapt their services to make sure we meet the needs of those service providers and actually completely operate on working around employee experience for the customer's staff. And I think that's where facilities management sometimes can get a little bit functional. We don't always think about employee experience. Often we think about statutory compliance or hitting KPIs and SLAs or financial targets. But actually, if we start to flip that rhetoric and start to think about how our service delivery is impacting on employee experience, certainly with the knowledge that we have across the customer bases that we serve, there's just a great opportunity there for us to take our knowledge and help take the customers on a journey. In terms of Pareto through this time, I'm lucky Pareto continues to grow. We have a fantastic team that's been phenomenal through this time. It's well documented that Pareto has always been an agile provider that's tech-based, cloud-enabled, and all entirely based on just trying to do things in the most effective way. We haven't fallen out with customers through this time. And actually, we've added about 10 new contracts since March 2020. It's been an interesting challenge to mobilize contracts, including TUPE during this time. But actually the team have adapted and changed and made sure that they have done what the clients needed us to do on that side. And I think as time goes on and as time moves forward, we're actually starting to see that we can see light at the end of the tunnel. We are starting to talk to customers about how they're going to come back to the office. We are starting to understand what the vaccine might be. You know, as we sit here now, there's more than, I think, 16 million people that have had the vaccine. And we do start to understand in terms of what the office reopening might look like, and also how they might anticipate that the staff members that they have are going to use those office spaces. And for companies like Pareto and I think other SMEs out there, it's now about starting to create that blueprint, but doing it now in February. So let's say we start going back in July this year, we can start to execute that plan. But the other thing we shouldn't forget, and Pareto is very fortunate, we operate across a number of really high profile, incredible, inspirational, high productivity workspaces. We have knowledge across so many different areas and so many different customers. And what we're able to do is share that knowledge between our customer bases. So we've been working on things like writing COVID risk assessments for our clients, you know, on their behalf, the compliant COVID-19 risk assessments that we all had to have as statutory law. We've worked on signage, we've worked on office design, we've worked on flowing around the office space and everything in between. And actually, I think facilities management organizations can now really be the leaders and the beacons of expertise and knowledge to really show our customers that we can help them to come back into the space. Because the fact is, if we don't take this opportunity now as service providers, someone else is going to take that opportunity for us. And this is a really critical time. I think the final bit I just wanted to cover on, and certainly within Pareto's experience that we've seen, is we have really seen our team struggling with mental health through this time. Pareto has 175 staff now. We operate across 3 different countries. And actually what we're seeing is there's been a real listlessness in their feelings. People don't know what they're aiming for. Everything just feels a bit like Groundhog Day and everything's just continued to go over and over and over again. And we've really had to work hard, especially using platforms such as Zoom and Teams, to make sure we communicate and continuously collaborate really with our team members to make sure they're okay. And I think that's just really important to pick up on, because some service providers in this sector have tens of thousands of staff that they're looking after. Many of them are on furlough. Many of them have been disrupted through this process. And unfortunately, many of them have been made redundant through this process as well. But for us, it's about continuing to make sure we try and maintain those relationships. And one challenge Pareto's really had through this time is we maintain those relationships through a high engagement model. We see our teams all the time. We buy them donuts. We reward them for great things. And we make them the heroes of our service delivery, because that's what these people are. And what Pareto's really struggled with is we don't have sites where we can go and there's 50 of our staff there on one day, because that's not an option now, because they're all sat at home. So we've had to be a bit more innovative and really think about things like quizzes, newsletters, general updates to the teams, just general check-ins where we invite everybody into the organization to have catch-ups too. And also making sure that the senior management team are spreading the right messages and giving out the messages of positivity for everything that's good that's going on at the moment. But all of that is great, but actually it has to be offset against the fact that people are struggling. And service providers, I believe, have a real responsibility now to work with our teams to make sure that we can gently start to bring them back into this concept that they're going to have to go to work again 5 days a week. And they're going to have to be in an office space every day. And they're going to have to get on a tube, and they're going to have to get on a bus. They're going to have to drive a car. They're going to have to sit in traffic, all those things. And actually, we now need to start to work with those team members to make sure that we are preparing them for that. And again, I think preparation early is absolutely the right thing to do, because from our side of things, if we can start to focus on what coming back to work might look like, people can start to get their head in order and start to get their ducks in a row for what that's going to be. And I think just a final point that Pareto's done particularly well through this time is actually we've offered free training to every single member of our staff, all 175 of them. So at the moment, we've got about 25 of our team members doing Institute of Leadership Management Level 2 training for free for the members of staff, because a lot of them wanted to make sure that they made the most of this pandemic and made the most of the time that they had at home. And I was delighted to see over a 10-week period, 25 of our team working on that, and will ultimately come out with a formal qualification at the end of it. So thank you for listening. Just coming to the end of that, I think there's a host of opportunities for SMEs and service providers within this sector. And I think we all need to work to make sure that we start to plan around how we come back and how we support our customers, but most importantly, how we support our teams. Thanks very much. It's been great to speak to you. Thank you.
Okay, and we're back with Q&A. I've got Peter and Julie with me. Andrew may be along in a minute, not sure. So please, questions on chat for Peter and Julie. Just while you're getting those questions posted, this business about should we be called FM or should we be called Workplace? There seems to be a majority today in favour of Workplace. That offends my soul as someone who's been in FM for 50 years. I think it's wrong. But what do you guys think? Peter?
No, it's been an ongoing discussion. I'm with you. I've also been a proponent for continuing calling it FM, especially as you know, I'm involved with IFMA, and we have had those discussions for a while now. But as IFMA, we also represent businesses and areas like residential areas that are not workplace oriented, and that's why I believe that facility manager is a wider definition other than only the workplace. And you also have to think about sports facilities, museum, entertainment facilities, hospitals, where the focus of the business is not only the people working there. It's healing patients, or it's entertaining people, or it's living there as a residential space. And that's why I'm still a proponent of using the word facility. It's wider, it has a wider appeal. Exactly the argument that I use. Julie?
Thanks, Martin. I hate saying, but I have to agree with Peter, more because of the different sectors, that we're operating in. From a corporate perspective, which is what I look after, Workplace is absolutely, I believe, the right approach and I suppose the right title, noting that clients and their employees are expecting more, they're in different places. So I think it encapsulates a bigger, a bigger spectrum of services and outcomes. But given that this is an industry that looks after multiple sectors and industries, it's a difficult one. I don't know if you're going to get your answer today.
No, probably not. And as someone who's been in the industry for 50 years, I've decided I'm going to leave it to younger people to make their own minds up. It's a question come through there for you, Julie. You talked about crowdsourcing at AstraZeneca. How did that work? And how did you get involved in that? That's an interesting area to be involved in.
Yeah, I think Martin, a lot of organizations are doing some form of crowdsourcing. It's really making sure that we're getting the voice of all stakeholders, particularly obviously employees, but not only employees that have had to be in the facility throughout COVID, but all of those that are working from home. So what we did was really, I suppose, call it a survey, call it crowdsourcing. It's the same thing, really. But what we did get was a huge range of really innovative ideas that, I think that's one thing. We need to make sure that when we're looking for information, when we're looking for ways to innovate, that we go wider than the traditional sort of industry, because that's where you see and you get differing views and differing opinions. So, as I said, I think more and more organizations, if not all of them, have already done some level of crowdsourcing. And as we go, particularly into the new, I suppose, the new normal, or whatever people want to call it, the better tomorrow, it's really, really important that we take and co-create with our employees and with our clients the workplace of the future.
Peter, IFMA, I'll talk IFMA for a minute, but people all over the world, what's the voice of facilities management how do you gather that voice and properly represent it?
I think as Julie but also Simon and Andrew alluded to, I think, and I actually wrote an article about this, that we are entering the age of facility management now, because I don't think there's ever been a time in the history of our profession where we have been such a central part of what's going on. I mean, we were absolutely front and center to resolving the pandemic and getting people out of the workplace, and also allowing them back in smaller groups, opening part of the workplace, and now at some point hopefully opening the entire workplace in a different format that we had before. Our frontliners have been front and center to managing the pandemic and keeping people safe and healthy. So I think we are actually speaking with a greater voice at the moment than we have ever done before. And I think that's being recognized. It's being recognized by governments, by initiatives, by large organizations. And it's not only the old question about outsourcing and how much money can we save, and somebody referred to it as the race towards the bottom. It's now being recognized for the value that we're able to create. And that's also why I think the industry has to pivot to this change, so we don't stay down at the bottom and shout up about cost savings. It's about fundamental different purpose of the office. It's about employee engagement. It's about creating these attractive workplaces. It's about taking responsibility also when people working at home. I think that fits under the FM responsibility, that people are working safely, healthy, also when they're working from home, that they have a desk, that they have proper lighting, they have proper Wi-Fi, and all these things that also needs to, and that's a very early stage at the development at the moment. But I think these are some things that are critical for FM, and if we do that right as an industry across the board and across the world, there's no limit to where we can take this profession for the future. Absolutely not. And we can see that also from IFMA. We are now partnering and inviting HR organizations, IT organizations, and other to partner with us to drive this trend as we move forward and look at a wider perspective of Julie, to what you're saying, the workplace. We still call it facility management, but it is that wider perspective that you take on the workplace, which is really about the outcomes that we're looking for, the impact that we can create, rather than just the typical sort of outsourcing discussion and about how much money we can save.
I have to agree with Peter. I mean, there couldn't be a better opportunity, and I suppose from a timing perspective, than now. If you think of FM or workplace, whatever you want to call it, Martin, it is in the boardroom of every single organization all over the world. And a spotlight has been shone on all of the services that we're providing and the experiences for their employees and the safety of their employees. Now is the time to make sure that I suppose we change the old ways and get what we want for the industry.
Yeah, your in your piece there was a chat going on in there about outcomes and vested, and that is so much more about taking the bigger picture. I mean, again, it's another one of those ones where us old blokes say, and that's what good FMs always did, by the way.
Yeah.
but there's a great focus on it now. But the difficulty seems to be the contractual, the commercial arrangements around that. It's a difficult model to break when we've got used to this input-driven cost pricing, input-driven approaches to everything. What are your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody. I suppose it depends on the maturity of the organization. I mean, vested models are built on trust, and transparency, joint outcomes, joint goals. There's that commitment, as I spoke with Dan earlier about a commitment to partnership and strategic outcomes. So it's not for everybody. I wish it was. And maybe we'll get there at some stage. But I think the big piece around the commercials is it is a shift. but it is where, the provider has to be incentivized for the right behaviors. What gets measured gets done. You pay for what, it's really, really important that, particularly in a vested model, you have to have that incentivization for the supplier to not only meet but exceed expectations and get the incremental or the bonus that's associated with it, and all of the people that are there as well. So, here's Andrew. It's not an easy one. It really isn't an easy one, but we're seeing more and more clients looking for a vested type approach, which is really, really positive.
Andrew, welcome. Technology, you got through.
We got there.
You just heard. We just moved on to this idea of the reality of vested contracts in FM, and that's putting a contractual model around what you were talking about, relationships. Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll see more? Do you think we will see more of it?
I certainly think we're going to see more flexibility built into contracts for sure. Certainly with the service providers. I think, when March 2020 happened and we had to go to every single customer and every single one was looking for reductions, changes, people changes, structural changes, whatever. We had to break a lot of contracts and we had to, have that flexibility. And I think, as I mentioned in my talk, I think a lot of FM contractors weren't willing to break those contracts because they're protected by them. And I understand that commercial position, not necessarily good for the long-term client relationship, but certainly the immediate commercial position. I certainly am seeing in renegotiations that we're doing at the moment as contracts are naturally coming up for renewal, that actually flexibility is important. And the way clients are trying to do that is focusing on perhaps shorter notice periods, not so much shorter contract lengths, because you've got a notice period that you can always execute anyway, whether it's 3, 10 or 50 years, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, certainly more of a focus around that. Not seeing much change around input-output spec at this stage, but I think financial directors certainly don't want to be told that they're stuck in contracts with their FM providers for long term and they can't make changes very straightforwardly. And as I said in our piece, really Pareto used that as competitive advantage through this time because we were able to service our customers in a certain way without going through the layers of bureaucracy, etc.
Peter, giving you a chance to put your Planon hat on for a minute. All of this needs good data.
Yeah, and I was about to comment on the vested. I'm a big fan of the vested model, but it is also very complex and cumbersome process to go through. It takes a lot of time and a lot of investment from both sides. But once it's there, it works really, really, really well. But it's probably not for all clients. And I think the more transparency you can get, the more digitized your relationship and the more you can rely on data and getting the right data points, the better chances you actually have for creating that flexibility that Andrew is talking about. So, I, as a now a Planon representative, I can only advocate for increasing the technology and the digitization of the services that you're providing and creating that foundation to create that level of transparency and get the right data points in order to manage for flexibility. Because you need, building trust is something that's easy to say but difficult to do. And it's the old saying about trust is something you earn over time. So it's very difficult to do that from the get-go of a contract. But if you have the right data points and if you can trust in your data, at least that's a way to build that trust quicker and have something you can trust, you can base your trust on and thereby create that level of flexibility that Andrew is talking about. So I agree with that.
Well, Peter, I think there's a really interesting challenge with CAFAM data because we've just lost a year of office utilization stats. And in terms of reactive data, plan maintenance, statutory office usage, etc. So that really throws an interesting spanner in the works in terms of planning now, because is 2022 going to look anything like 2020 did? Who knows? Because that's the whole change process that we're going to go through now. So I think data is more important than ever in terms of understanding how that's going to change over time.
That's true. And that's also historical data. So not only basing your data points on a year, But what it has given us it has given us a hell of a lot more data around behavioral usage and how people interact. Some of us are not able to capture that. Some of us are. But I think, I think that's key. That's key for the future. It's not only about the IWMS data or the CAFM data. It's about the whole life cycle of coming in and out of the office and all the flexibility, behavior experience that we have, and using apps to engage our end users. And that creates a whole new level of data that we can begin to use. Because at the end of the day, it is, of course, important how the HVAC system works and how we manage that and how it's sort of how you maintain that asset. But what's really more important is how people are actually coming in and out of the offices, when they're coming, how we can adapt our services to all that. And that's the next generation that we are seeing now in the IWMS platforms.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. And there's no question about that, Martin. And I think it's, that's something that is going to be a challenge for us, particularly when we have a hybrid working model, which we know we're going to. I think, the importance, we're rolling out technology. I spoke about 12pay earlier. In terms of our IFM platform, I suppose, there's going to be different entry points for employees depending on where they're working, whether that's from the third space home or the office. So I do think there's a way of capturing data, but it is going to be much more difficult, of course, than when you're in the physical environment, exactly as Peter and Andrew have just said. But I don't think it's insurmountable. And I think it's something that's going to evolve over time. The more and more services that employees are in with outside of the traditional office, I think, we're going to be able to harness a lot of that data. But I don't think we're there yet. But be interested to hear what Peter and Andrew think.
Andrew?
No, I don't think we're there yet. I think we've got a long way to go on that piece. I'm just seeing some really interesting questions on the chat around furlough and flexibility and all sorts of stuff. I appreciate we only got 3 minutes. I don't know if Peter wanted to add anything to what Julie just said.
No, I agree. I think I don't think we're quite there yet, but we are getting close now. And there's a lot of investment coming into this space, not only for already established IWMN providers like Planon and others, but also from big other investors like Schneider Electric just bought a stake at Planon because of the whole sensor technology and integration with the building infrastructure and making anything IoT enabled. But we also see big companies like IBM, Oracle, Microsoft with Sodexo and other areas that are investing heavily in this area. So I think also to the attractiveness of facility management is really coming on the radar screen, and we're beginning to understand as businesses what this data can help, how this data can help us not only to keep people safe and manage the building in a safe and effective way, but also how it can actually help us to run our businesses. Who's coming to the environment? How are people feeling about it? Why are they not coming? Why? All these types of things that we can begin to have data points around this, and that is going to be business critical in the future. And that's why the facility managers, as also tech enabled, is going to be such a critical role in any business for the future. It's absolutely really, really interesting what's going on and how it's changing. And how COVID-19 has also forced that the speed of that change upon us. So I think that's quite good.
So Andrew, yes, the chat the chat has been focusing on the whole furlough thing and government intervention. Is it a good thing? Has it stopped us being flexible? What's your perspective on that?
I think a couple of things. I think Simon Duke from NewServe raises some good points as well in the chat on there. But I think the point on furlough, I think service providers, I think we're able to be better at HR than a lot of our customers are. We can do things a lot quicker, certainly with the massive organizations that we work with. So for Pareto to claim 100 people on furlough every month is reasonably straightforward for us to do. Whereas if you're asking some of the, 500 million plus companies that we work with, much more challenging for them to manage that within the HR arena. So FM was given a lifeline really by the government to be able to utilize that furlough scheme fully and offer flexibility back to the customers. Now that's coming to an end, and perhaps it will be end of April now that will finish. I think the really difficult conversations start now, as part of what I was saying in my talk there, that actually we do have to be bold enough to say we are going to reduce costs, we are going to make people redundant, we are going to change the structure. And that's a horrible situation for us to be in. But ultimately, as service providers, if we don't do it, the next competitor will come in and do it for us. And actually, it is about that collaboration piece. And as I said, working with customers now rather than the future. I personally think furlough is a lifeline for contractors in this sector. If we didn't have the ability to offer that, I think there would have been much wider redundancy. Certainly within our business, we would have seen that. And we've been able to protect a high number of jobs through this scheme and give significant amounts of credits back to our customers through this time as well.
Okay, I'd like to ask other people comments on that, but we have run out of time now for this session. Thank you very much, the three of you, for really good presentations and for your contribution to this. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.